Ukraine's relations with its neighbors have always been intense and sometimes complicated. This is the reality of historical processes involving those who care about their past, let alone their future. Political and social circles, diplomatic games, business or even personal interests have been influencing relations between both countries and their citizens for centuries. This is the Ukraine Neighbors Points of Contact podcast, and here we are looking for commonalities in the relations between us and our neighboring countries. Ukraine-Slovakia. Hear my voice.
To get to know someone and make friends with them, to find common interests and then build further cooperation on the basis of respect and understanding, you need to open not only your eyes and ears, but also your heart. And nothing can reach this heart as deeply as culture, literature and art. We have already mentioned in previous episodes that Ukraine and Slovakia know very little about each other. And this is little bit of knowledge is still more about the political situation. Of course, the war and the election race, cultural markers seem to be waiting to emerge. Slovak writer and publicist Michal Horecký is absolutely convinced of their power.
We now have a huge movement for the free culture and for culture for all, because culture is heavily under threat from this new authoritarian nationalistic party. And suddenly, when there is a demonstration dealing with national theater or national gallery, 10,000 people come, or 20,000.
Pavlo Klimkin, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine in 2014-2019, has a similar vision.
Ми насправді наших сусідів.
We don't really know our neighbors very well, and they do not really know us. What famous novel by a Slovak writer have Ukrainians read recently? Let us do a poll on the streets of Kyiv. I think no one will tell you. Does anyone know a Slovak rock band or Slovak jazz? And do Slovaks know this about Ukrainians? They do not know either. And these connections, very human, cultural, intellectual, are very important story.
Це дуже важлива історія.
By the way, quite recently, Ukrainians and Slovaks had an important contact in this area, which is important for the current situation. In November, the DAGAMA publishing house presented in Slovakia the translated novel There is a Land Beyond Perekop, a landmark work by Ukrainian writer and curator of many literary project Anastasia Levkova. The book presents the work of the writer for Slovak readers, in which she reflects on more than 200 conversations with residents of the Crimea Peninsula since 2012. In the book, the author retells the history before Russian occupation. The main idea of the work is the knowledge and understanding sought by Ukrainians and Crimeans. This book will give Slovak readers more information about Crimea, which, despite the Russian occupation, dreams of returning to Ukraine.
We already are one family.
Decorating the daily life of Slovaks with a mosaic of Ukrainian artistic and cultural initiatives while protecting them from Russian propaganda is a significant task for independent media. Undoubtedly, in recent years, the main topics of journalistic materials have been the Russian-Ukrainian war and all that it entails. However, as the monitoring shows, there is always a high interest in publications about people, their lives, their experiences and actions. Ukrainians have become an integral part of everyday life in Slovakia and are even changing the country's life in some ways, says Michal Horecký.
Every fifth child in the first grade.
Кожна п'ята дитина в першому класі Братислави, столиці Словаччини, українська дитина. Отже, маємо 20% першокласників з України та діаспори. Ці люди вже стали значною частиною нашого суспільства, частиною повністю інтегрованою, яка працює, сплачує податки, є частиною нашого культурного життя. Ми дуже пишаємося цими новими громадянами, які є навколо нас. А після перемоги, якщо вони захочуть, я був би радий, щоб вони змогли повернутися додому, в Україну. Але я впевнений, що багато з них теж хотіли б залишитися. Тож, завдяки Україні ми теж інша країна. І таким чином, я думаю, що у нас дуже дружні стосунки.
Is it democracy fatigue?
The main information problem in the Ukrainian media is the success of the Russian disinformation and propaganda campaigns. They distort the picture of reality and impose a distorted pro-Russian vision of the war on Slovaks, as well as other countries. As a result, for example, according to a sociological studies conducted by a Globsec Trends in 2024, only 40% of the Slovaks surveyed confidently named Russia as the aggressor and culprit of the war in Ukraine, while the majority blames the West and Ukrainian instead. It is therefore not surprising that given the background Robert Fico's statements, in particular about the expediency of the giving up Ukrainian territories occupied by Russia, are irritating and painful for Ukrainians. Political analyst Grigorij Mesezhnikov calls the situation as a democracy fatigue.
So it means that somehow maybe this so-called fatigue from democracy now expressed itself in the higher support of those political and social forces which are in contradiction or disagreement with liberal democracy. But I'm not skeptic. I think that, Slovakia is a good example. Robert Fico, he has 25%. Short and very concrete. I think that it depends on the political changes. If Robert Fico will lose the next elections, then all other Democrats will renew the very positive relations with Ukraine.
So despite the importance of economic cooperation, the most desirable thing for Ukrainians is the unequal pro-Ukrainian position of the Slovak Republic to win the war against the Russian occupiers, because providing such support is an important skill of those who are responsible neighbors.
Seeking understanding and not hitting sore spots is an important skill for those who are responsible neighbors. This is the Ukraine Neighbors Points of Contact podcast, a project to find commonalities in Ukraine's relations with its neighboring countries. The podcast was created with the financial and organizational support of the Gайнріха Bьолля Foundation, Kyiv Office, Ukraine.